Hey there, it's Jenny, and I am going to share with you today how I planned in my memory planner. I am using the Pinkfresh Studios Some Days collection. I'm using really honestly just a couple of these pattern papers and the ephemera. However, I had pulled out the stickers as well because I had thought maybe I would use those, but I didn't end up using them. I will link these products in the description below. I'm in love with them. I generally love Pinkfresh stuff anyway, and this collection is top of the list for sure. This is a big happy planner from the Happy Memory Keeping collection, so it is undated. It also comes with some printed dot grid and lines. I like that fine, but it doesn't encumber or be part of my memory planning. If it works out, great. If it doesn't, that's fine too. I don't plan around it, is really what I was trying to get to tell you. And so I had to add the dates to the top. I've already printed the photos on my Canon selfie printer. I created the grids using an app called Pickframe on my iPhone. There are other apps. This one does cost a couple of dollars. I've just been using it for so many years and there's no reason for me to switch. I'm sure there are other free apps that do the same thing. This one just is really intuitive for me and I really like it a lot. And like I said, I have been using it for so many years that I have definitely gotten my money's worth. So it's no problem there. I am using a paper trimmer to cut apart the photos. This is actually just a really cheap paper trimmer. I have a really expensive one that's really big. I hate how much room it takes up, and so it's in my closet, sort of buried under some things. However, it's a great trimmer. I prefer this tiny one that I can use and store so easily, so that works out great for me. I write the dates on the little tear off strip using a permanent marker, so like a ultrafine Sharpie. I actually use a Pilot one that I like the nib of, but it doesn't really matter. I do this because I have a hard time remembering, and sometimes honestly, like those COVID stats, for example, they look exactly the same. So having the date is really helpful. Baseball games are another example of things that look exactly the same. I can see now as I'm starting a garden that my garden photos would look exactly the same. So while it doesn't really matter in the end, 3 years from now when I'm looking back at this album, it doesn't really matter. But if I can be as correct as possible, that's what I want to do. So I am laying out the photos. I try to keep them on the dates that they happen, but I don't have to. It's not something that is a hard and fast rule for me. If it works, that's great. If it doesn't, that's okay too. I don't worry about like photos of my pool, photos of my dogs, photos, those types of things. Honestly, it makes no difference whatsoever. The week will do just fine. So those are the ones that often get moved around a little bit. And again, that's a personal decision. You would decide for you what works for you. But my pets, they look the same on Mondays they do on Friday, so it really doesn't make any difference. My kids, however, if it's a baseball game or something, it might make a difference what day it was on, and that is just determined by a lot of different factors. So you can see I do change up the orientation of my photos as well. So for example, like right there, I used a horizontal photo, which is honestly, I don't do it that often. Most of my photos are vertical, and so I don't have too many of those. I do have 2 this week, which is fairly unusual, or maybe it's not. I don't know. I'd have to go back and look. It just feels unusual, maybe based on how many vertical photos that I do have. I also love to layer them and overlap them. Not only do I think that it looks really good, it also helps conserve space, especially when I have so many photos to include each week. Now, if you're a person who doesn't have a ton of photos, this is such an easy fix. First of all, you could go down to a classic size happy planner. Second of all, things around your home, things around your neighborhood, things in your environment, foods that you eat, changes you see in your community. I mean, there are so many things that are part of your life that seem insignificant, but genuinely can help you tell the stories you want to tell. I'm going to go through this ephemera now, or die cuts. It really depends on what kind of a paper crafter you are as to what you call these. I call them both. I actually typically call them die cuts, but I'm going to dump them out and I'm going to go through them. They're super cute. I love every single one. However, they're not all really related to this week. A lot of these are actually sort of, as the title would include you to think, some days, or actually, I don't think these are the some days. These are keeping it real. And some of them are for the not so great days. This was a perfectly fine week, minus the rain, of course, because I hate rain. Have I told you that before? I hate it when it rains. Anyway, most of these are for those not so great days. And so I don't want those. Like that, this was a perfectly good week. I don't need that. So I'm just picking out the pieces that I can use, and there are plenty of them. So it wasn't like, oh my gosh, I should switch up what I'm using. No. It works just fine. I only need a handful anyway in a few different spots. You guys know me. I am often using a visual triangle. Heck, what am I talking about? Often? Always using a visual triangle. So I really only need 3 clusters, and between these embellishments and pattern paper, I am going to have plenty, because as you can see, I have so many photos. I don't really need huge amounts of embellishments this particular week, though I'm giving it a try. I'm seeing what else I can include, and between this, the plans, and any little bits of journaling that I'll include, I will be all set. So you can see there are going to be 3 major clusters. I'm going to punch the pattern paper, FYI, and add it to one of the clusters. The upper left-hand corner right there, the lower right-hand corner. Look at that paper, isn't it gorgeous? These colors are amazing. And then up at the top where you have that cloud and the rainbow, those are going to be the 3 main focal points, decoratively speaking, for this particular week. Now this one worked out because I was able to punch 2 different color palettes out of that same piece of paper. And so yes, they're the same, but they're also different. And so I was really happy with that as a layering, because it felt like I was keeping it really cohesive, but it was not super matchy-matchy. It wasn't the same, and it's not boring at all. So now I'm just going to adhere all those pieces that I pulled out to put down. So like this one right there, it says, yes, please. My dogs were groomed that day. So if you have a dog, especially a golden retriever who gets stinky and gross, you know what I mean by grooming day is very exciting, because yes, please. So it's not really necessarily part of the cluster per se, but it is accenting that particular photo. So hopefully that makes a little bit of sense. Now I'm adding these here, and that doesn't mean that I won't still go back and add more things. It doesn't mean that I won't try out some layering. It just means I'm getting the basics down, and then we'll build around that, because I don't always, have an idea initially, and then I see how it is, and then I build upon that. So for example, I knew I still wanted to include something, and I had this blue grid washi, which I love, but I don't get to use very often because I don't use a ton of blue in my projects, like straight up blue. I use aqua, I use, those kinds of things, but I knew I wanted to use these 2 different, this is a light blue now, washi tapes. And so I'm just using these to accent the 2 clusters. And I feel like washi tape is sort of having a little bit of a comeback, at least in some of these more neutral patterns or in small bits and pieces. And I'm really loving that, because I think washi can be so versatile and so fun to use when used in a small way, like in little bits and pieces and stuff, and then also just in a really fun, decorative way, like not layering washi on everything, but just using it as a little accent. So now I punched out a little flower, and I wasn't 100% sure about it, but then when I got it right in that right spot, it was perfect. The little florals peeking out from behind that cloud. That's really what life is like where I live in Southern California. There's always flowers, and so then you have those rainy days and there's still flowers peeking out everywhere. So now you can see I've got the basic structure of this layout done. Honestly, I could leave it. Like I could totally walk away from this and it be done. There's photos, there's embellishments. It's great. We already know the dates of the things. However, that's not good enough for me. So I'm going to go ahead and add the actual activities and appointments and things like that. I am using my Studio Calico labels for that this week. There are something like 15 colors. And so they always match perfectly, and I love it. The first thing I'm going to do is use the circle, and I'm going to trim off one of the edges so it will sit flush against the photo. And honestly, circles can be hard for me, though I find myself using a lot of them lately. And the thing about circles being difficult is that once I trim off that edge, it sits flush and I love it. It really changes things. And this is a good example right here. The circle photo, they always feel a little weird to me, but then you add that little label over it and it adds that straight edge. Now I'm also using the template, what's the word for that plastic thing that's not template? Stencil, there you go, to just add a couple of lines to write things down. I don't reach for this thing very often, honestly, because I don't really necessarily love super lined up linear lines, but I don't know why I don't, because this thing is perfect in terms of just jotting things down super quick, just getting a couple of lines down if you don't need them to be particularly wide. I will link up the Studio Calico labels in the description below. I love them. Honestly, this is a genuine review from me. They sent them to me for free initially. I have repurchased them so many times that they definitely got their money's worth on sending it to me to try out in the first place. They are $1 a sheet. There's a ton of colors. There's 2 different sizes, and yeah, you need to let them dry for just a minute and then they're good to go. And they just always look really good, and I love the pop of color that they add to a page. I know I talk about them in a lot of my videos. I'm not trying to sell you on them, but if you're looking for an inexpensive way to add box stickers to your planner, these are a great option. As you can see, I mean, I have a lavender one, for goodness sake. Lavender isn't a super common color, but I've got a sheet of stickers for that. So now you can see I have added all of my plans for the week. So it's on the right track as far as I'm concerned, because I love adding as much of the detail as I can. So now I'm going to go back and add the longer lines that I talked about a little bit ago using the mild liners, because again, I love that pop of color as well. And again, who hasn't bought a supply that you're really not exactly sure how you're going to use it? That was me with the mild liners, but now I have found so many ways to include them that they are such a staple, I couldn't imagine not having them. Anyway, so I'm going to use these to draw the lines for the journaling and then also add those little bits of color. Now, I didn't use the stencil for that because it's not big enough to use with my mild liner, so that's why I pulled out the mat and the ruler. But I'll just go back and I will add my journaling on these, and I love mild liners. Again, they're one of those things like the Studio Calico labels that I use a lot, I talk about a lot, but they're just a really, really great way to add some color to your pages without having to go overboard. They're very, very simple, and you can find, there's so many colors, you can find it to match all of the things that you are using. So now I write, I guess, over the highlighting. So I don't use them as lines per se, like under my writing. It's hard to explain, but I think you can probably get what I'm saying right here. I just love the way that it really makes it stand out a little bit more, and it shows the importance of the journaling, which I like to include. I like to include the details of what we've been going on. I don't usually get too deep in this writing. This isn't like a journal for my feelings. It's really just sort of more of a what we were up to type of thing. But if you wanted to get really deep into how you're feeling about something, you absolutely could. That's it for me this week. Thank you so much for stopping by and watching. I really do appreciate it. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comments below, and I will do my very best to get back to you. Thank you so much, and make it a great day.